We are going to be starting at Numbers 15, verse 1. Shalach lo?
Shalach lecha.
Lacha.
Number 15.
Could you say something later when we, after I read this? Could you say something about lecha? Shalach lecha.
Okay.
Okay? Would you do that, please? Okay. I'll read the prayer in Hebrew. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Amen.
Amen.
Well, now
We'll see if David has
well,
here's
David,
Michael.
if you would like to,
Oh, there's Michael.
Yeah, he made it.
hi, Michael. You're muted, Michael. You're muted.
But at least you're here. So I'm glad you're here.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes,
Okay.
Everything is said. David?
yes, welcome back. Okay,
Yeah,
now
very-
you'll be here just for my poem. It's going to be short today because we got a late start. But I've been watching that comet over the last week and just loving it every night. I see it coming out. I can see the tail very faintly against the darkness of the night sky. And then when I put a telescope on it, it's just so beautiful. And the one person in the world who could write about comets as if they were people was Leslie Pelcher in his wonderful book, Starlight Nights. And this is what he had to say about comets right in the first chapter, because he discovered 12 comets in his lifetime. He wrote, I have seen a dozen comets, hitherto unknown, slowly sweep across the sky as each one signs its sweeping flourish in the guest book of the sun. Thank you, and back to you, Marty.
Thank you, David. Anyway, we are on Numbers 15, verse 1. And just to do a brief recap, there have been a number of situations where Moses has been challenged and has prevailed with the help of God. But we've discussed the fact that that if Moses is a prophet and he's speaking the word of God, you're also challenging God when in this situation. And what we're going to read here will probably explain further in older language what may be going on. Okay, so David, would you like to please read verses 1 through the end of 10?
Okay, I'll be happy to do that. And just as what happened last week, I'm still in the process, the little mistake I made, I'm still in the process of refraining. So here we go. Now Korah, the son of Ishar, the son of Kohath, the son of Levi.
You on Numbers 15, verse 1.
Number 16.
We are on number 15.
Oh, 15.
Oh, did I read
Okay, let's try
one?
this. Okay, I'm refraining even more. And the Lord spoke unto Moses by Deber Adonai el Moshe Lemor, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them, When ye are come into the land of your habitations, which I give unto you, and will make an offering by fire unto the Lord, a burnt offering, a sacrifice, in fulfillment of a vow clearly uttered, or as a free will offering, or in your appointed seasons, to make a sweet savor unto the Lord of the herd, or of the flock. Then shall he that bringeth his offering present unto the Lord a meal offering of a tenth part of an ephah of fine flour, mingled with the fourth part of a hin of oil, and wine for the drink offering. The fourth part of him shalt thou prepare with the burnt offering, or for the sacrifice for each lamb. Or for a ram, thou shalt prepare for a meal offering 2/10 parts of an ephah of fine flour, mingled with the third part of hin of oil. And for the drink offering, thou shalt present the third part of a hin of wine, of a sweet savor unto the Lord. And when thou preparest a bullock.
David, time out. Okay. You want to go to the end of 10? I'm sorry, you go ahead.
Or for a ram, I don't know where we are. And I'm gonna go 8 to 10. And when thou preparest a bullock for the burnt offering, or for a sacrifice in fulfillment of a vow clearly uttered, or for peace offerings unto the Lord, then thou shalt be presented with the bullock of a meal offering of 3/10 parts of an ephah of fine flour, mingled with half a hin of oil. And thou shalt present for the drink offering half a hin of wine for an offering made by fire of a sweet savor unto the Lord.
Okay, I'm sorry, my error before. First, I'd like, the rabbi mentioned something before, but I'd like him to explain again. Shalach Lacha.
Yeah, we've encountered this this Hebrew particular formation before. The most important time being the call to Abram and Sarai of Lech Lecha, okay, which so technically it means go to yourself. Okay, some people would translate it by yourself. Some people would say, and most of the commentators kind of focus on do it for yourself. Okay. In other words, God is saying, whether it's in the Lech Lecha or Shlach Lecha, God's saying, I know what the outcome's going to be. Okay. But you need to find out for yourselves, whether it's going on the path that I will show you, or whether it's sending out the spies. Okay. I know what's going to happen, God says, but you have to do this for yourself, because obviously you don't necessarily just believe me. So prove it to yourself. Go it for yourself, kind of is the way that they interpret it.
Okay. And believe me, these different stories have been a big test, not just for Moses, but for God.
Yeah.
Because God is getting angrier and angrier.
Right.
And Moses is intervening more and more. So any comments about what David just read?
Well,
Go ahead.
You know,
Go ahead, Steve.
just from Hertz, just a point of clarification. You know, of course, the Torah, as we've seen, it's just one long scroll. There's no punctuation and there's no notation of chapters or anything. So just a little editing comment that because this seems to be kind of all of a sudden before that there was a narrative portion. Now all of a sudden we're right into details of sacrifice. So what Hertz comments is that the priestly and ritual laws, because now we're hitting a segment obviously of priestly and ritual laws and description of sacrifices. So the priestly and ritual laws mentioned in this chapter seem to be supplementary to the sacrificial code of the book of Leviticus. So this is sort of a portion that maybe could have been added to Leviticus, but it just showed up here, okay? What else did they say? They were promulgated during the years of wandering in the desert. Okay, so it's just a clarification on why we're suddenly talking about sacrifices when, out of the blue, kind of.
Right.
Right. Let me add into it
Yeah,
also.
Please.
The focus seems to be now on this, so here's the recipe. Here's the winning recipe for what God each, this
Mhm.
sacrifice should contain this sacrifice should contain this, and the next, and I want 1/3 of this and 1/4 of this, and that will be the reach nichoach, that will be the pleasing aroma, that will be the, I always think of it, that's the winning recipe, of what we want. But the key is actually the very first phrase, or the first verse before the 1 and 2, before it gets into the list of the sacrifices and whatever. It's, we're coming out of these episodes where most of the children of Israel have been told now they're not going to enter the land. Okay. They're either gonna die of the plague or earthquake or whatever it might be. Okay, but then verse 1-2 comes along and says, no, there will be members of the people, there will be Israelites who will enter the land.
Mhm.
Okay, and when they do, I need them to remember this culture, this sacrificial practice. Okay, but it's a positive statement. Don't think that the Israelites are lost here in the desert. Okay, there will be those who will enter the land. That's the way that they understand it.
Very good, very good. Because it's a message of hope.
Yes.
Okay,
Right.
and that's being relayed on to Moses and the people. Any other comments about that?
I would
Yes.
like to, no, I don't have a comment. I never read because I've had voice problems, but they're trying to change it. Could I just try reading one verse? So people
Sure.
could understand me, maybe?
Sure. When we get to
Okay,
that.
this is verse 11.
It's still discussing what we read, but I
Okay.
will mention that, I'll call on you next. Now, is this the same formulary that they were using in Exodus? As they were
For the sacrifices?
and Leviticus for the sacrifices, or is the
I'm sure there's a spreadsheet somewhere. Okay.
Because
Yeah, but I don't offhand, I don't remember. If,
Okay.
If it is.
Because
Right.
I didn't recall the additional mixtures in there. So when they enter into the land, there's going to be
The flour and then mix in some of the oil.
That's right. That's right. So it's an additional task that has to be done in following the recipe, as you said. Okay. Any other comments about that?
Well, and also.
Go ahead.
That
Go ahead.
every sacrifice is a little bit of a community barbecue. Not necessarily a community, but there are some people are involved. So
Right.
the phrase is that this is all given to God, but of course it's being eaten too, or portions of it
Right.
are being eaten, and that's not unique to the Jewish people. That was sort of, there are many cultures where the group barbecue and communal barbecue evolved as a community activity. And in this case, it's also has a religious significance. And I guess the modern adaptation of that, what's often said by rabbis, is the family Shabbat table, for
Yeah,
example,
sure.
is that normal, is the modern extension of that. So it's basic, it's not just a lot of formulas to, to send up to heaven. It's a community activity. It's also
Very good.
religious.
It's a
It has
community
meaning.
activity, but each act is in the singular.
Correct. It's directed to each individual.
Right.
Right. But overall, everybody, but this is specific. Although it says it's for the whole community, it's really the duty of each individual to do these things. Because you're offering the sacrifice for a specific reason, as was explained earlier. And so, but I don't want to go into any of those details, but it would be reasonable to look at it that way too. So, Marcia, would you? Oh, thank you.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Wait a minute.
My commentary is a
Wait a minute,
women's
wait a minute,
commentary,
Wait a minute.
so therefore
Wait a minute,
a
Marcia.
little different
Marcia,
than the
please
one
wait.
before.
Okay. David had a question about what we just read.
Yeah, there's one thing I wanted to say. I'm sorry to slow things down a bit, but I was very touched by the comment made just now that said that God was angry and Moses was stepping in more. And it reminds me of this beautiful relationship that Moshe had with God, and that God admitted that he could have emotions of his own, just like we do, and that either he called on Moses or Moses just decided he's going to try to assist God in calming him down, which really worked. I don't think each one of us can have that power to calm God down, but some of us do. And one thing that I would like to say is that I think Wendy, my late wife Wendy, was one of those contacts. And I remember the day of the total eclipse of the sun last April, when the eclipse became total and it was completely cloudy, and I thought it even might rain. And I'm thinking that up in heaven, Wendy said, God, let David see the eclipse. And God said, well, Wendy, I don't think so, because David hasn't been that good. He's done a few things, and I don't think so. And then Wendy said, God, let him see the darned eclipse. And God said, well, okay, Wendy, you're the boss. And the sky cleared a little, and I saw the most beautiful eclipse I've ever seen in my life. And Wendy said, thank you, God, for doing that. I know you are the boss, but thank you for indulging me. And God said, you're right, I am the boss. Except when it comes to David, I task you to taking care of him.
Lovely.
I just wanted to share that story with you.
That's a beautiful
David,
story.
that's good. Would you write that down? Write that down.
I will do that,
Please.
Yeah.
and I will send it to you.
Very
Thank
much.
Yes, it was a beautiful thought. Thank you.
Thank you.
As I was saying, this is a women's book that I'm reading from, so it's a little different than what we heard before.
Okay.
This is the number 11.
I
Thou
just,
shalt be done with each ox, with
I
each
just wanted-
ram, and with any sheep or goat. As many as you offer, you shall do thus with each one, and as many as there are. Each, right? Okay, that's fine. Thank you so much for letting me read.
oh, would you care to read some more? well, you've,
Okay, just another one. Each citizen, when presenting an offering by fire or pleasing aroma to God, shall do so with them. That's it. Thank you.
go ahead, Steve.
Yep, I just before we get too far ahead, I was just curious about some of the measurements that are mentioned here
Oh,
that we
all
sort of
right.
glossed over. Hin keeps
Right.
getting mentioned, okay, and so what they say in the etymological dictionary is it is a liquid measure, the sixth part of a bot, whatever, so then you have to look up and find out what a bot is, okay?
Yes.
But they say it is interestingly a loan word from Egypt, okay? For other Egyptian loan words in Hebrew, see ahu in words there that are referred to. So, you know, occasionally Hebrew doesn't have its own original words, it borrows, you know, so, and this is an Egyptian liquid measure, the hin, okay? Which, and I guess, you know, in the Hertz Bible, I guess they did somehow figure out what it worked out to be in their, oh no, the only thing they figured out was ephah, which is about 7 pints. They say 10th part of an ephah is 7 pints. So somebody with a little bit of a mathematical bent,
Yeah,
I guess,
I
managed to figure out
right, I think
equivalency.
I think there's someplace in the Talmud they further explain on hin,
Oh,
you know. Yeah,
so you can sort of, and it's probably something like a fist or something like that, and then you have to
yeah, right.
equate it. Okay.
Okay. Uh, any comments about what Marcia just read?
I don't have a comment, but I think we need to kind of keep it on the table, so to speak. Is all of a sudden the word changes here in 13 to Ezrach, which is a citizen,
Right.
as opposed to some of the others that are introduced
That's
as kol ish, as any person.
Right.
Okay, so obviously there's a distinction. I'm not sure what it is yet. I don't want to give anything away.
Okay.
All right. But there's definitely a change in definition of who's included in this particular rite, R-I-T-E.
Right. Right. Right.
Right, right.
I'm going to look up, yeah, Ezra in modern Hebrew
Is a citizen.
is a citizen, but
Right. Mhm.
this is the first time I've seen it, that word used in the Bible.
No, we've
So-
we've seen it. We've
Have we?
encountered it earlier, yeah, but right.
Peitzani, well, I have to, this
Okay.
is all,
Well, you look that up. Let's, those are interesting aspects of this. But if we read on, we may be able to figure this out a little bit for ourselves. If Michael, are you okay for reading?
I don't know where I am.
Okay, it's Numbers 15
Chapter
verses that's chapter 15 verses 14 through the end of 16.
And when throughout the ages a stranger had taken up residence with you, or one who lives among you, would you present an offering by fire of pleasing odor to the Lord? As you do, so shall it be done by the resident stranger. It shall be a law for all time throughout the ages. You and the stranger shall be alike before the Lord. The same ritual and the same rule shall apply to you and the stranger who resides among us.
Okay. Any comments? Go ahead.
I have to point out something,
Sure.
okay? And again, as Steve was mentioning earlier,
That's
we
right.
need to remember that originally there was no punctuation, no vowel patterns, and so.
no chapter heads.
Right, no chapters, paragraphs, whatever. And the Masoretes came along and they made so these decisions. So literally, I'm gonna do kind of a
It's a run-on
informal
sentence.
translation between 14 and 15.
Right.
Okay, the way Michael read it is one way of having it,
Right.
but so the end, in the middle of 14 is there's the pleasing aroma to God. Okay, thus shall you do, or thus shall they do. Okay, literally thus shall you do as it shall be done. And the Masoretic text has a period there that ends 14, right? Then the first word of 15 is the community or the congregation. Okay, so my translation, for example, doesn't put the period until after the word congregation.
Right.
So shall it be done by the rest of the congregation, period.
Oh.
Okay, as opposed to the congregation, this is a law for all time, one law for you and for this resident stranger. So it doesn't necessarily have a major impact in this case, but it's just a reminder that all of the patterns were arbitrary.
Right.
Someone decided, because if you're a traditionalist, when God gave the Torah, it didn't have all the periods.
Right.
There was a human intention to put in the periods in the paragraphs, and then following the chapters and verses, and came much later.
Just as a reminder, this may be due to attempts at trying to blend the P version and the JE version.
Yeah, might be.
So,
Might be.
it could, because
Right.
how do I get both working?
Mhm. Yeah.
So I just don't know.
Again, I'm not sure that in this particular paragraph that it makes that much of a difference, but it is an example
Right.
of that happening. That the sense of the phrase you would think would be, the Hebrew would be Kenya aseh kahal. Okay, thus shall the community do.
Right.
Period. As opposed to thus shall it be done. Period.
Right.
The community. Da 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 da.
Right. Now there's,
Yeah.
okay, yes, Steve,
Yeah,
go ahead.
I just wanted to, and our whole discussion about Ezra and citizen, is that at this stage, there is no distinction between religion and people.
Right.
It was just presumed that, oh, you're part of a people, this is what the people do, but there wasn't even a term for it, because it was just part of being a member of the community. That's all. It was, I didn't really find too much on Ezra, except that the Aleph is some sort of, they called it a prosthetic for some reason. And it's added on to the Zion Reish Chet. So, but then I looked up Zion Reish Chet. It's shiny.
Yeah,
So,
right.
so I that wasn't too enlightening, not for me anyway. That would something that we require further research, I guess, to sort of figure out what the term really comes from.
I don't remember exactly when it's introduced, but right here we still have the ger. We still have that's the foreigner who resides within your gates. Okay. A little bit later on, we're going to have the ger toshav and the ger tzedek. We're going to have the one who's interpreted just as the resident alien. We don't have to get into whole kinds of conversations about immigration these days, but but the resident alien is the ger toshav, the one who dwells among you, and the ger tzedek is one who, like Ruth in the Naomi story, Ruth chooses to become a part of the people, but not yet an Ezrach, not yet a citizen.
And how do you understand this stage, historical stage, becoming a citizen? Who becomes a citizen? And how does that
I
happen?
don't really know. I'm sure there are some comments that deal with it. I don't really know offhand because they usually just talk in terms of the Bnei Israel, of the Israelites, the children of Israel. But there was some, one of the, something in the back of my mind is that, but it's much later and I never really accepted it myself, but because it seemed like a much later interpretation. And that was that you were a member of Bnei Israel, you were an Israelite, if you could trace your lineage to one of the tribes.
Oh,
Okay, you were an Ezrach if you're a citizen, you're included in the people, but you don't necessarily have the yichus. You don't necessarily have the lineage that you can identify. I don't know if I buy that, but I remember that once,
okay.
or maybe more than once, but I do remember hearing that.
Marcia's correct.
Yes, Marcia.
I don't want to stand on a box, but my mind doesn't have an ending until by the rest of the congregation. So we women are included. So I just want to let you know about that. So I don't have a period until after that saying is part of the talk. So we're all here.
Okay.
Oh, no question. No question.
Now,
Michael wants in.
yes, Michael,
and David.
go ahead, and then back to David. Go ahead, Mike.
And 15, there shall be one law for you and for the resident stranger. It shall be a law for all time throughout the ages. What I'm getting personally to demonstrate that there's one God. There's one God for you and the resident stranger. And the resident stranger doesn't say what the resident stranger believes, but this is to demonstrate that there's one God. That's what I'm getting from this. I may be off track. I don't know, but that's what I'm getting. To demonstrate to the resident stranger that there is one God. Because I don't know who is the resident stranger, where he came from.
I think if I may, I think you're right, and that's the distinction. The resident stranger hasn't necessarily said, I believe in your God. Okay? They're living in your midst and they may be following all of your laws and your customs, but they haven't made that declaration of I believe in your God, your God is my God, and that's what would carry them over into being what we call a ger tzedek, a righteous stranger. I think you're right.
And to continue on 14, where it says about present an offering by fire of pleasing odor to the Lord. This is a ritual that I think sets up for the resident stranger some official some official demonstration of that. And around, I think we did it on Yom Kippur. There was something passed around, and this comes from the Orthodox too, I believe. I can remember as a little child, there was something passed around to everybody to smell something what's supposed to be a pleasant odor. And
Yeah.
that comes from this passage, I think, or this part.
It relates.
I
It
think
relates.
in the latter, I think what you're talking about is the spices, the spice
Yes.
box.
The spice.
Yeah, the spice
Yeah.
box, yeah.
At the end of Havdalah, which at the end of Yom Kippur.
Right.
Yeah, that
At
passes.
the end.
Right, yeah, yeah, but on Yom Kippur or at the end of every Shabbat. That's
Yeah,
yeah, but
yeah,
let
go ahead.
me kind of relate, I think. And again, I don't want to necessarily open up a Pandora's box unless we want to have the conversation, okay? That I think what 14 and 15 are referring to is that, so here's this stranger who has taken up residence with us, right? Who has joined our community, but has not converted. In our terms today, we would say converted, or one who has not yet adopted officially to become a citizen, to become a member of the Jewish community. Okay, not whether or not they paid their dues to join the temple, because technically you don't have to be Jewish to belong to the temple. But right? But can the non-Jewish person be the one to recite one of the blessings on behalf of the congregation? To be the only one to light the Shabbos candles, let's say, or to say Kaddish, or do the Torah blessings? And the answer, and this is like with most congregations that I'm aware of, okay, the answer is that we make sure that if someone has done that blessing, but they're not Jewish, then the whole congregation joins in.
Right.
So that blessing was not what we call a bracha levatala, was not an invalid blessing. And I'm wondering if that practice or that way of not embarrassing
Right. It does.
the non-Jewish person, but on the other hand, making sure that we don't feel that our prayers or again sacrifices have been diminished, have been minimalized by having someone who's not officially a member of the tribe do it. So I think that's what I heard you, Grace. Okay, I think that's what it's saying, is that if a stranger comes into your residence and he or she is the one, thank you, Marcia, because it could be a she, he or she does and presents this, in the same way that you do, then follow up by having the whole congregation do it
Right.
also. I think that's what
It makes sense.
related.
So this is briefly a question, maybe a statement. I'm getting a feeling that God is saying that all peoples, whether they're Jewish or Israeli or not, are considered a part of this.
Can be,
Right, because I think part of what God's saying here is that all human life is important.
Mhm.
Maybe, yes.
Yes.
Yeah, and maybe
Yeah.
that person has a better barbecue recipe than the other people.
Well, the
Right.
whole.
As long as it isn't pork based.
As long as it's not pork-based, right, exactly,
Hear
exactly.
that, Axel?
Well, it never really talks about taste. It
That's
only
right.
talks about the aroma.
That's right.
So, okay, right.
Okay,
Yes, Marcia.
could I just put it in a thought? Last week, because this is a new week, when we had the Torah and we passed it around, in that congregation that day were many people who were not Jewish, but
Right.
they wanted to be a part of it. But
Right.
our congregation realized this because, as I understand, that we asked the Presbyterian Church to have some of his members come and help us to sign also into the Torah. They came and they paid and they put their letter in too. And that was an understanding that there are other people who want to be a part of what we're doing every day. Am I right in talking about this, or am I off key?
You are correct.
And there's absolutely nothing in Jewish law that says that a non-Jew can't touch or help write or whatever the Torah. As long as it's in the presence of, again, as
Right.
long as it's in the presence of the congregation, however that's defined. Usually meaning a minion, but okay, as long as it's not the only person. So in other words, we wouldn't invite Pastor Craig Lindsay from Valley Presbyterian Church. We wouldn't invite him to be the only person to recite a blessing over the Torah.
Right.
But for him to recite a blessing is perfectly fine as long as we do one also.
Do it too. Yes, Michael.
Yeah, I want to ask this question, or maybe make a point. If something is not written into Jewish law, does that automatically mean that we can do it, or does God allow for free thought that to use common sense based on what Jewish law is and what God deems what is, pardon the expression, kosher, or makes good sense, and leaves some area of that open to Jewish thought and the Jewish experience?
That's a good question.
It's an excellent question.
Yeah.
I'm gonna see if anybody else before I try to answer my answer, and it's only my answer. I don't want to see if anybody else wants to jump in, but
I'm sorry, I was distracted. Can you
Yeah.
restate that?
Just need a restatement, me too.
if I'm understanding Michael's question is, do individuals or a community of Jews, okay, in a sense, do we have the right to say that something is officially kosher or legitimate and valid within the context of Jewish law on the one hand? On the other hand, does God still dictate or determine or say that this is what, thou shalt do, thou shalt not do, and that's the only way that something can be valid or again kosher within Jewish practice? Am I on the right track there, Michael, and kind of putting words into your mouth?
Somewhat. I don't think it's exactly what I said, but it's somewhat. I tried to rephrase this. It's not written into Jewish law, so that means we can do it. What I'm asking is, just because it is not written into Jewish law, should we go ahead and allow certain things? I think that God has given us, for example, the 10 Commandments as a guide. For example, all of the Torah to me is a guide. And just because God permits it does not talk about it. Should we go ahead and allow certain things just because it's not written, based on what we know of Judaism and how we follow Judaism, and we read. This is like thinking between the lines, so to speak. You you get certain things by reading the Torah, and may not be in the Torah, and God may not put into Jewish law. So it gives us the power to consider because it's not written in. So should we do things just because they're not written in with Jewish common sense thinking? So I don't know if that clears it up a little bit. That's not quite. I'm not the best at being too clear about things, especially now when my mind doesn't. But I'm hoping that my point is getting across.
Think so.
No, I think what we're talking about, what he's talking about is actually the Mishnah or what preceded
Yes.
the Mishnah. Is that, there
And succeeds from the after, right?
Yeah, that there was a recognition, there was the traditional belief is that there is a Torah Baal Peh that was alongside the Torah Bichtav, the written Torah, and there were traditions that sort of elaborated beyond and explained beyond and told, well, this is what the text is really saying, but of course you can do this, which is, your questions, or, that there are things that are permissible and things that aren't permissible that aren't exactly explicitly said, within the written text. So, and then
Let me say this. Let me use this example. We have Pastor Bruce. Pastor Bruce has been a wonderful friend to our temple. And he's not Jewish, but he displays a Jewishness about him. And so when he comes to the temple, he's welcome, especially the high holidays. And so there's a demonstration of decency and a wonderful person, and that's an example of using good common sense and allowing him to do what he does there at the temple, because he has demonstrated a certain decorum, if you will, on how he presents himself, and something along those lines. Just maybe it's not the best example, but it's some example that I could think of.
Martin, did you want to say something? Ray, did you want to say something?
I was thinking of Pastor Bruce's respect for the temple and Jewish life is maybe what my.
Yeah, but it doesn't make him Jewish.
Yes,
No.
it doesn't.
But he
Right.
respects us, we should respect him.
Exactly.
Oh, absolutely.
And
Not enough.
the reason I said that, the rabbi specifically, when we unscrolled the Torah, okay, the rabbi made a point of reading the end and the beginning to show a complete cycle. Visually, we saw a cycle. What was very interesting, if you took a diameter line and went straight across the room, you came to the center, the few words that are stated. Do you want to repeat that?
Well, that's v'ahavta l'recha kamocha. That's love your neighbor as yourself.
Right.
Is that
And
recorded?
Yeah.
yes, that is. So now if you reread this with that statement in mind, it'll make sense to you.
Okay.
With an exception.
I still want to come back and try to.
Because it doesn't mean they can do anything they want. If it's a ritual, saying prayers or things like that, it's our responsibility as being Jewish to be sure that it's also stated by Jewish people.
Right, and it's also,
Right.
if they do it as you do.
That's right.
Right.
So it's a way of finding compromise,
Common ground.
common ground. That's right. That's all I'm going to say.
Respectful.
And respect.
Right.
That's right.
And sorry, this is
Go ahead.
off the agenda a little bit,
Go ahead.
but I'm
I just don't want
curious.
to, I don't want to forget how I want to,
Oh.
I want to phrase coming back to Michael's excellent question.
But I was,
Go ahead.
it was just very, very interesting how the unfurled Torah worked out in this room. And I'm
Yes.
just wondering if you calculated the circumference of the
Of
room
course.
before you did that.
Of course.
And you knew the length of the Torah scroll.
No, I've unrolled Torah scrolls probably 50 times.
Oh,
Okay, and I have a pretty good sense on what size,
Okay, so.
what
so
size,
experience
what
is-
size
Say
it
it
is, yeah.
all.
I mean, they may be taller, but they're usually just about the same length.
Okay, cause it matched. I said, wow, how did
Right.
that work out? It was the circumference of the room. That was the length of the
It-
Torah.
And the rabbi measured 2 pi r.
Go
Go
ahead.
ahead.
3.14. No, so Michael's excellent. Oh, David, did you want to jump in?
Yes, I do want to jump in.
Please.
My comment actually goes all the way back to the very start of this discussion, when the question was momentarily on who is a Jew. And this reminds me, and you gave a very good answer, Marty, but it reminds me of my very first visit to Israel back in 1976, when they had a law, and I believe the law still stands, called the Law of Return. And this has been virtually since the founding of the State of Israel. And the question was, who is a Jew? And the prime minister at the time said something that I've never forgotten. Anyone who says she is, anyone who says he is. And I've always loved that, and it's always brought me closer to the State of Israel throughout my life, and I still love that. Back to you, Marty.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
The rabbi wanted to say something here.
So Michael's excellent question
Yeah.
is the 2024 version of Tevye's question.
Right.
Mm.
Okay,
Good
well, why do we do this? I don't know, but it's a tradition.
That's
Okay,
right.
and I think rephrasing Michael's question is, can a tradition have as much power, as much spiritual or religious resonance for us as a mitzvah, as a commandment from God? Okay, and if it does, is that considered Jewish law? Can a custom that has been around for hundreds, if not thousands of years, that wasn't in the Torah, but it has become something so strong and so meaningful and so resonant for us, can that be considered Jewish law on the same level as something that comes from the Torah? The Talmud's answer is yes. They talk of halacha be'oraita. This is Aramaic, it's not Hebrew. The Talmud, the halacha, Jewish law that comes from the Torah, or halacha d'Rabbanan, or halacha that comes from the rabbis. And the rabbis, however, that's an incorrect term. It should be halacha whatever the ka'ama, I think is the Aramaic, that comes from the people. Right? In other words, that the people have incorporated, and it may come out of people's understanding of the Torah text, or it may come out of a blend between Judaism and Zoroastrianism, or whatever it might be, but it becomes a custom that is so strong and so meaningful to people. It's tradition, and you would never think of not following it. The philosophical answer to what I think Michael is pointing out is one of the major differences between Orthodox approach to Torah and Jewish law, and the more liberal, reform, conservative, reconstructionist. And that is the Orthodox that would primarily say the law comes first and foremost from the Torah, and then only if these customs and whatever can find justification in the Torah. And that's like Michael was saying, well, you know, can we find the justification in relating it to the 10 commandments or the 613 commandments, you know, which may be, you know, playing on words or whatever, but we can find the proof text, we can find the quote, so that even though God may not have said specifically, thou shalt do this or thou shalt not do that, we all understand that that's within the context of Jewish law. The liberal would say that we use that framework as a guideline for making the decisions that are appropriate for us now. Okay, like we just included one a couple of minutes ago, either explicitly or implicitly, when Marcia said something about, I want to make sure that the women are recognized. Today, 2/3 at least of the Jewish world recognize women participating equally in Jewish ritual. Not all, but I can tell you as a fact that most of the modern Orthodox Jewish world is trying to find the proof texts by which they can reword Jewish law, because the people, the Jewish people around the world, are saying so strongly, we believe that women should be treated equally. Okay, so that's the way that plays out.
No longer a minority.
Oh, definitely no longer a minority, even in the number of rabbis and cantors.
Any other comments? Well, I'd like to just read what Rabbi Plaut said.
Sure.
For these verses. The Hebrew text is obscure. Hence this great discussion. because of the way it's written, as the rabbi pointed out, there are run-on sentences here, and there are broken sentences as well. And so you can interpret this in multiple ways, and that's the beauty of it. So I just wanted to point out that, as Rabbi Plaut said, the Hebrew text is obscure. Okay. So go figure. So interpret as you will.
Now, incidentally, we did read verse 16, right?
Yes.
Okay. The Eitz Chaim, which is the conservative movement's commentary to verse 16, says the following. Okay. The stranger is placed on an equal footing with the Israelite citizen in matters of civil law. But there are differences between them in the fulfillment of religious law.
And if you think about our own legal system, you have federal law, state law, and civil law.
And in some places, the religious law
that's right.
can supersede the state law in some places.
That's right. So you have to understand. So there's a parallel as to what's being said. Just very interesting. Any other comments? Okay. Now,
that was one heck of a discussion.
That was a great discussion. Great discussion. I really enjoy that. Who would like to read next? Want to read, Steve?
Yeah.
Why don't you read from 17? I just have to check. Oh, we got plenty of time.
Okay.
Verse 17 and all the way through the end of 29.
Okay. And the Lord spoke unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel and say to them, when you come into the land where I bring you, then it shall be that when you eat of the bread of the land, you shall set apart a portion for a gift to the Lord. Of the first of your dough, you shall set apart a cake for a gift, as that which is set apart of the threshing floor, so shall you set it apart. Of the first of your dough, you shall give unto the Lord a portion for a gift throughout your generations. Okay, continue or?
Yeah, go ahead.
And when you shall err and not observe all these commandments, which the Lord has spoken to Moses, even all that the Lord has commanded you by the hand of Moses, from the day that the Lord gave commandment and onward throughout your generations, then it shall be, if it be done in error by the congregation, it being hid from their eyes, that all the congregation shall offer one young bullock for a burnt offering, for a sweet savor unto the Lord, with a meal offering thereof, and the drink offering thereof, according to the ordinance, and one he-goat for a sin offering. And the priest shall make atonement for all the congregation of the children of Israel, and they shall be forgiven, for it was an error. And they have brought their offering, an offering made by fire unto the Lord, and their sin offering before the Lord for their error. And all the congregation of the children of Israel shall be forgiven, and the stranger that sojourns among them, for in respect of all the people, it was done in error.
Okay, so any comments?
Another good discussion. I'm interpreting this as, this is how you can,
Can you speak up so they can?
is God telling Moses that this is how you can better yourselves among my eyes because you've been so unwilling to believe in me? That's what I'm seeing in this. Is that anywhere close to what I'm hearing, or because he mentions in errors because of these errors you made in the past? Is that?
No, it's specifically for this, if a sacrifice was made incorrectly, unwittingly, the wrong time, some detail was, yeah, it's not to make up for a previous sin. It's specifically only if this offering was done inadvertently, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Michael, your hand is up.
Yeah, this burnt offering is very interesting to me because the burnt offering, and it's of an animal, and the smell of burnt meat does have a pleasing odor. You know it today because of what we do at barbecues and that type of thing. It has a very pleasing odor because they don't talk about flowers, which has a beautiful scent. Spices, in my opinion, spices don't have that great of a scent. It's really not an attractive scent to smell spices. If you compare other things that have a pleasant odor, such as perfume and flowers. So I was really interested to understand why that's not in there. If anyone has an idea about that. Why you have to burn up an animal to get a pleasant odor when there are other things that would provide a pleasant odor without burning up an animal, burning a life.
I did want to comment on something else, though, if I could comment, but answering his term, I think it's an expression in Hebrew that the idea was to have, like I mentioned before, the sacrifice in the communal barbecue, if you will, which you wouldn't have if you were just spraying around air freshener or, or handing around a bottle of perfume. It's yeah, the expression used is it's a pleasant aroma for God because it's a little bit of a poetic image. You're burning something and God is somewhere out there. So if the understanding of fire and smoke rising was that it's going up, it's sort of dissipating and it's going somewhere to the unknown. So that was the intent of, I guess, this sort of the I don't know what the expression is, poetic or sort of to give sort of an image, to create an image that people, because things have to be sort of put into even very spiritual or vague or abstract things have to be put into some sort of more visible form, even though a smell isn't visible, okay, but some sort of tactile.
Well, my point is that you're burning up life. God produces life. And human beings, animals, it's a living thing. God produces the life. So now what you're doing is you're taking a life. How is that? How does that wash? I don't understand that. That's my point. You can produce something that smells very pleasant without taking a life. An animal life, human being life. That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah, and it's a custom that was prevalent in the ancient world of which we today have mixed feelings. And, like you talk to vegetarians or vegans, they're not really into that idea either, and a lot of us have mixed feelings about it. But the idea was it was an adaptation of a very prevalent ancient world custom, and it was practiced also in our community, was animal sacrifice. Other communities took it to extremes. They also had human sacrifice, which is even more egregious, which was, completely abandoned in our community, luckily.
And then there's the contrast between the fact that God commands these particular sacrifices, burning the animal entirely, or whatever it is, as opposed to that came from God, okay, and we're not supposed to question that, as opposed to when the children of Israel fashioned a golden calf to worship. That was a no-no. That was a sin. So God, yes, you're right that in saying that God, these are all God's creatures, and why are we allowing this to happen? Well, as in many other cases, that's what God told us that God wants us to do. So, if we're not going to necessarily have an answer, we can struggle with it, we can hypothesize, but we know that when we misinterpret it or try to take it to a different level, that's wrong.
I don't know if that answers Michael's question, but it's a good one.
Sure.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It's an answer, but it's up to me to buy that answer.
There you go. So what's the
If God answers the question, let us know.
Okay. Do I have your phone number? Oh, by the way, before I forget, Marty, please indulge me 1 second. I need to find the Mishubera prayer in the siddur, exactly where it is. I can't find it, and I need to have that. So at the end of this thing, if somebody can help me with that, I appreciate it.
Which sitter, Michael? Which prayer book? The same one we have here?
Yes, the one we use at the temple.
Okay, I'll go find the page number.
Thank you. Thank you, Marty.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Go ahead. Steve wanted to comment here.
Yeah,
a
yeah,
different
there is
subject.
I don't know if you're gonna come to this yourself, so,
You
so
go ahead.
I'll
You go
let
ahead.
you. But there is a discussion of challah, which is very
Yes.
interesting, which has a rabbinic sort of elaboration and interpretation. And a lot of us might remember our bubbas cooking challah.
Mhm.
And the tradition was always to take a little piece of dough from the challah that you're making and throw it into the fire. Otherwise, it isn't kosher. And actually, that custom
It's in here.
is in this
Mhm.
section. I can read a little bit of the,
Go ahead.
rabbinic midrash here, which is
It's
sort of
from Mishnah.
interesting.
It's from Mishnah.
So this is from the Talmud. Yeah, this is from the Talmud, a little bit of elaboration on this challah thing. The loss of separating a portion from the dough. While in the wilderness, Bnei Israel did not set aside a portion from their dough. They became obligated in this mitzvah only after entering Eretz Yisrael. From then on, whenever someone made an omer of dough from one of the 5 kinds of grain, wheat, barley, oats, spelt, or rye, he was required to separate a part of that dough termed challah. So the challah, technically, we know it as the braided loaf, but this is challah referring to something slightly else. It's the separated portion. The challah was holy and was given to the Kohen, to the priest. The mitzvah of challah actually applies only in Eretz Yisrael at a time when the majority of the Jewish people is there. However, our sages ordained that challah be separated even outside of Eretz Yisrael and even in our time, so that these laws should not be forgotten. Today, our challah has to be burned. Although we fulfill our obligation today even by separating a very tiny amount of dough, the minhag, the custom, is to separate a kazait. Kazait is the volume of an olive, okay? So that's the definition of how much dough you're supposed to separate, about the volume of an olive, okay? Separate a kazait of dough and burn it. Someone who has prepared the appropriate quantity of dough separates the challah and recites the blessing. Baruch atah, blah, 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 asher kiddushanu mitzvotav v'tzivanu lahafrish challah min ha'isa. Is that right? Okay, but to separate the dough, okay? If one forgot to take challah from the raw dough, he must still take it from the bread, okay? Although anyone in the household may separate challah, this mitzvah was specifically commanded to the wife. She therefore amends the sin. Now here it gets a little bit midrashic, okay? She therefore amends the sin of the first woman, Chava. Okay, so
Right.
the sages sort of tied it into the story of Adam and Eve. Okay, our sages term Adam the pure challah of the world. Okay, this means that he was created by God, completely pure, without evil desires. And Chava, now the plot thickens. Okay, Chava caused Adam to lose his former purity. After he sinned, he and his descendants were drawn towards physical desires, even if the fulfillment of these desires would harm them. The mitzvah of separating challah has the potential to bring back the purity of spirit that was lost through Adam's sin. Hence, by fulfilling this mitzvah, a woman rectifies Chava's sin. One should be careful to fulfill the mitzvah of separating challah. Famine, and now this is a little bit rabbinic and a little bit orthodox, okay? Famine is brought upon the world as a result of neglecting it. While its observance brings material blessing to the household. And this is actually taken directly from the Talmud, that if you do fail to observe this custom, you may be bringing famine. Right. And fulfilling the custom brings bounty.
Right.
And
two things.
Oh, yeah.
Right, okay. One is that this is separating a particular portion from the dough that's distinct from tithing, which is separating a different portion from the dough, different kind of dough. But
You're right, yeah.
poor joke. Okay, all right. But the challah is specifically, you mentioned it, you read it, but kind of passed over it. Specific is one of those. There are three or four that mitzvot that are specifically only for women.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Right.
What are the others?
Well, one has to do with mikvah, and I'm blanking on what the third one is.
It isn't lighting candles.
No, that's not.
Oh, it's,
Right.
oh, well,
Right.
okay.
Question.
It's tradition for the woman to do it, but
Okay.
it doesn't mean that a man can't do it.
Grace has a question.
Okay, so, my mother is the Jewish side of my family because of her grandfather. And, we nicknamed her Bernie. Because, I think I like this.
With an E or with a U?
You, right, because inevitably, anytime she made challah bread, she would forget that she put the burner on a little higher than the rest of it. The end of dinner, and the challah is coming out, it would be burnt. And so she'd have to chuck it and start over. So we named her Bernie. So I'm guessing that was tradition she didn't know she had.
Yes.
Except you don't have to chuck out the whole thing.
No,
Right,
it's-
right.
It really happened that way.
Uh-huh.
It's fun. That's why we named her Bernie.
I hate to interject this, but
There's that
but
twinkle in
go ahead, Marcia, go ahead.
Question. I have seen in my own household that some of my daughters, when they have the bread, they don't pull out something before it goes around for everybody to pull something. Is that what we're talking about today? Maybe.
No, that's after the bracha is made and you're handing the challah around, you're talking about, right? And everybody pulls instead of cutting, right?
I didn't understand it. I didn't focus on her question. I'm sorry. Could you ask the question again? Could you ask the question again? I'm sorry.
Okay, I've noticed that some of my daughters, before they pass it around, they pull out a little bit first. Is that what they're doing because it used to be that you had to pull out something and burn it? Well, maybe because it wasn't supposed to be eaten. Is that why they pull it out before they pass it around for everybody to eat?
It might be, again, so many of these let's call them customs. Throughout, literally, we're talking of hundreds of generations. So many of them have changed from their original meaning and taken on different meaning, maybe even more meaningful meaning. Doing this and covering your eyes had nothing to do with bringing the spirit of Shabbos or whatever. It was something totally different. It was a legal fiction in the tradition and the Jewish practice. But now, don't tell anybody that it's because of a legal fiction. It's because, oh no, I'm welcoming the Shabbat bride and I'm bringing the spirit of Shabbat into me and bringing love to my whole family and whatever, which is fine. That's fine. So it might be, yes, if she tears off, it might have been, that was the family custom and nobody remembers why, but it goes back many generations to this official mitzvah here in the book.
You know that many of these young people are creating new ways of doing things too.
And that relates.
Thank you so much.
That relates back to Michael's question. Is it just as kosher if a 21st century group of even Orthodox Jews, not even, Reform or conservative, but if a group of Orthodox Jews develop a new tradition, is that just as kosher as something that's been handed down for 2,000 years?
Time will tell.
Right.
Any other questions about that? There, if we, well, I'm going to bring us back to what we had read before we were brought back before, our discussion period. And it's a very interesting commentary here because it opens up more discussion from the standpoint of what is the literal translation versus what have other groups of Jewish thinking, groups of Jewish thought. What have they brought into the discussion? And possibly changed tradition or interpretations over time. By this time I forgot who started us off reading verse 22.
29.
Well, we went as far as 26.
Right.
Right.
And so on verse 22, the translation that I have here says, if you unwittingly fail to observe any one of the commandments which the Lord has declared, ... Okay. And any comments about that first? Errors of omission. I mean, yeah.
Unwittingly would be like a mistake. It was
Yeah, and he
intentional.
didn't.
Unintentional.
Unintentionally. It
Yeah.
happened.
So any comments about that? Yes, David. And then Ken.
Yeah, what I'd like to say is the second word in chapter 22 in my translation. It says, and when ye shall err. Doesn't say, and if ye shall err. And I'm interpreting that to say that God knows that the people are going to make mistakes. Humans make mistakes. And that is not in itself a bad thing. And I like that with the use of the word when there.
Hey, very good. Do you have another translation of that?
Well, not translation, but this is a commentary that according to the Talmud, when there's talking about all the commandments, they're actually referring to something very specific. And according to the Talmud, the reference in the present passage, which is verse 22, is to the sin of idolatry committed unintentionally.
That's what
And that sin involving as it does apostasy from the fundamental doctrines of Judaism is equivalent to breaking all the commandments of the Torah. Now, other commentators like Nachmanides, who I think was a son of Maimonides, are inclined to refer these words to any comprehensive breach of the ordinances of the Torah. Okay, but as usual, the Talmud sort of inserts something that's not actually there, but they feel should be.
Okay, so this could be sins of omission or commission.
But unintentional. It's bish gaga.
Yeah.
All unintentional. It was just by pure mistake, as opposed to someone, knowingly, doing something.
Yeah. If it's unintentional, there's a way that you could get forgiven, and it's by a burnt offering.
Right.
Um,
So you
Kent wanted to talk. Kent wanted to talk.
Yeah. hand up, and I apologize, Kent, I forgot that. You were gonna say
You ready
something?
for me? Well, I was, and now I've, after listening to Steve, um, I find a contrast that, given what you read that Maimonides' son had written or whatever, is different than I gathered very clearly from this section, starting with 17. So the thread that I followed, and Rabbi Norm spoke to this, and I think he's spot on. This is about a half an hour ago, Norm. I'll bring you back to what it was in a second. But so the Lord spoke to Moses, okay, and it was specific to when, as a people, they enter the land of Eretz Israel. Okay, it's not gallivanting around the desert. It's not Exodus from Egypt. It's when they enter the land. And then you go down to 22, and this is where, Norm, if I heard you correctly, you said, yeah, the commandments are speaking about, and all of these, the sacrifices, so forth, that they refer to are specific to when you enter the land, not to other commandments that occur in the Torah. That's how I read it, but specific to what's laid out here. Okay. And it seems to me, and then the last thing is just an observation, but let me get back to the Maimonides component in a second, is this inadvertent failure to observe the commandments. It's kind of like, yeah, observe the commandments for the ritual sacrifice and the burning of incense or whatever it is. And God says, well, you just, in a way, there's some nuances that are different, but it's a redo. It's like, hey, you get to do it over again because you didn't do it right the first time. You know, you ever notice that people don't do it right the first time, always find time to do it over again. So you have to do it over again. But what I hear from, I heard Steve read, it's like, oh no, this applies to like beyond the rules of going into, crossing into the land of Israel. And I don't get that here at all. I didn't see that through any section that we've read. And I've read beyond a little bit. And it gets pretty dramatic if you intentionally flaunt God's commandments. But again, I was bringing it back to the commandment that are in here. And we haven't gotten there yet, but it's in the next paragraph or two. But there's a commandment that the story is told. You don't know whether it was a Hebrew or a stranger in the land who did not honor the Sabbath.
Right.
And it was commanded that he be stoned to death. But that isn't one of the rituals or one of the commandments for entering Israel per se in this section. So I just see some contradictions there. Okay. So again, my apologies. We haven't gotten to that section yet that begins on 32. We haven't gotten there. But it's quite dramatic, and I don't think it has any play with what preceded it.
Well, it does relate in a way. What happens if you make a mistake and nothing bad happens to you right away?
Speak up, speak up.
What happens if you make a mistake and you do not recognize it as an error? Nothing happens to you. Okay. What is the human tendency?
What?
If nothing bad happens to you, okay, after you do something wrong,
There's no consequence.
there's no consequence, right?
You don't feel guilty.
You don't feel guilt. So you may say, because I don't feel guilt, I can do it this way because nothing bad happened. And so if by accident, okay, you start doing things in that new land of Canaan, and you pick up something, they're doing something, and we're gonna, by the way, what Kent mentioned is going to play out in subsequent readings. Okay? In the book of Numbers. And
Well,
but
if that's the case,
yeah,
if
no,
you start,
I'm not finished. I'm not finished.
okay,
Because if you continue doing it that way, you will then justify doing it another way. That was not proscribed. And so as a result, it becomes, and it's interpreted by some as idolatry. Because idolatry, it doesn't necessarily mean a figure. It's a practice of something that makes you feel maybe good, like money. Substitute money for idolatry. And if you're making sacrifices, okay, are you giving up your money in donations to make up for sacrifices? It may please other people, but not necessarily God. And I think that's where this dovetails into here. In Rabbi Plout, the rabbis explained this as follows. The passages in Numbers deal with the consequences of idolatry. Those in Leviticus with all other sins, other interpreted this that it applies to two sets of laws to sins of omission and commission, respectively. But idolatry has been interpreted in law. Nobody has mentioned that.
Yeah, thank you, Marty. But I have to tell you, and I don't want to belabor it now. I'm not getting it that what we've been reading deals with idolatry. I just haven't, I can't make that leap right now. And what's interesting, if I may, in the section about all the inadvertent, you inadvertently don't perform those rituals properly, you get a redo. That's kind of like through section 22 through 27, 28, 29. Okay. But then in 30, that last paragraph, it simply says, if you don't, defiantly, like, I'm not going to do these things, they're cut off from the people. Doesn't say that they're killed. They're not strung up. They're just, they're removed from the people. Like, get out, go away. They're sent to the wilderness. Okay. And that may be a bit overstated, but it was so I don't see anything in there about the idolatry. So maybe I have to do more work, and I know I do. But that next paragraph that eventually we'll get to, it's like that comes out of nowhere to me. I mean, what is it doing here in this
Maybe
section?
you have to wait to get there. Okay, to get to the punchline, if you will. Because you'll see what happens when you do certain things out of customs that you may come in contact with the Canaanites, and what will happen if you do it unwittingly or wittingly.
Okay, that's fair.
All right. No, it's opening the door to what comes next in the next several weeks.
Did we get to 26? We did read 26.
Yes, we did.
Mhm.
Please,
Yeah, good, 'cause there's an interesting commentary on 26 and Hertz that ties it to Kol Nidre, which
Yes.
we went through
Right.
not that
Yes.
long ago. Okay, 26 is all the congregation shall be forgiven. This verse is solemnly recited 3 times before the opening of the evening service
We
on
only did-
Kol Nidre night.
Sorry, we only did it. Right,
Yeah.
Yeah, but traditionally.
because
okay.
it's linked to Kol Nidre. but-
Oh, right. And rightly so, because it may be said to be the keynote of the Day of Atonement in its message of forgiveness for all sins,
Right.
and not only of involuntary transgression. So here's a little bit of a pill pull on that. By the sincere repentance which Yom Kippur demands, the sinner shows that his willful sins also were largely due to ignorance, and hence they are treated by God as if they were done in error, bishgaga. So even the intentional ones are sort of forced in under the category of bishgaga, which is unintentional, okay? Because if you're, seeking of forgiveness and act of teshuva is really done honestly.
Okay. Any other comments here? That was a very,
Well,
Uh, if something is done, that you're not supposed to do, but it's done unconsciously, unwittingly, by accident, and it's done in the community by one person, it's incumbent upon the community to tell that individual, well, this is wrong. So I think that there's some blame, for lack of a better word, will fall on the community as well for not explaining
right.
to the
Sure.
person who committed this unwittingly act unconsciously, did not know. So some of the fault also would fall on the community, and if they know that this is not the right thing to do and it's done unconsciously, so some of the community has to take the blame for it, and remember that on Yom Kippur, when it's read, at least in the Orthodox, that God can read our inner thoughts. So God knows. God will know if it's unwittingly, if it was an accident or it wasn't.
very good point.
Yeah. I-
Go ahead.
Everything that's been said is, I would agree with. 2 points. One, yeah, I think it's questionable in 23, okay, of which mitzvot we're talking about,
Mhm,
okay?
mhm.
Anything, kol asher tziva Adonai, all the things that God has commanded through Moses. Okay? Is it from the day when God began giving those commandments throughout the generations, or is it from Hayom, which is from today?
Right.
In other words, and maybe this is a little bit of a response or a context for Ken. I almost see this as like as case law.
Mhm.
Is, somebody came and said, wait a minute, what happens when such and such? If there's a ger, if there's, a stranger amongst us who does something out of ignorance, he or she just didn't know. It's unwittingly, they did something that was wrong, but they didn't know that it was wrong. And so God says 2 things. God or Moses, however you want to say it. Yeah, it says 2 things. One is that there is a procedure for this.
Mhm.
There is a way that we respond as a community, to teach and to show that, that there are sacrifices by which you can ask forgiveness. That's number 1. And number 2 is that there is forgiveness. And that is possible for a sin or something, a mistake that was done in error. Okay, you know,
Very good.
so,
And that's,
so I isolate that particular paragraph. The other thing is just to point out that when they talk about, I apologize, I think I have a sneeze coming, but when they talk about idolatry, when they talk about idolatry here, you know, Maimonides or whoever
sure.
is making that comment, the phrase is avodah zarah, which is like alien or strange worship.
Mhm.
Okay, you know, so that could include a lot of different things.
Right.
Okay.
Huh, so real quick, so thank you for that, Rabbi Norm. So that the omission or the inadvertent error may have, in a way, conjured something that was not halakhic at all, that had nothing to do with the
No, I mean, okay.
performative
And
ritual.
anticipating the episode that's gonna happen, okay? This person may not have known all the restrictions about what you can and cannot do on Shabbat.
Right. Well, right.
Okay? But it's, if somebody did something that was prohibited, but didn't know that, the rest of the community would still qualify it as avodah zarah. It wasn't necessarily idol, you know, idol worship. It was strange practices or, you know, practices that were outside the realm of Jewish or Israelite practice.
Okay, I get it. I understand. Thank you.
That's just a maybe. That's not, you know, that's not definitive.
Well, and again, because we haven't gotten there yet, the act we're talking about doesn't seem so strange to me. It seems like an everyday occurrence. If you've got to cook or stay warm or whatever it is, the gathering of wood. It wasn't like he was carving an image of a frog and that was, you know, on a piece of wood, and that was going to be, you know, put up on his mantle, which then it would like, oh, you know, time out. We're not doing that.
Okay.
So we'll come back. We'll come back.
We're gonna get there.
Kent,
Right.
if you're with us next week, would you, after we finish reading that section, would you restate your question? And you would
I'm laughing because I'm
it
gonna
really,
probably pretty drugged out. On Friday preceding, I'm having my right hip replaced. So next Shabbat, hey, look, I'm gonna be probably sitting or laying somewhere, so I may tune in, but I'm not sure I'll have
okay.
all of my cognitive abilities at hand.
All right, but now I understand, because some of that is answered, but if we read one of the verses, we are going to have a field day, because you cannot tell if this example is an error of omission or commission, and I'll bring that up next week.
Yeah, right.
Okay, very
Because
good.
it just says it's a guy who did this. And that's why I wanted to save extra time, because we're right up to the end of our session.
Thank you, Marty.
I'm gonna save extra time to go into that, because there are a lot of assumptions that are being made if you just read the text at face value. So you have to become a lawyer, and you have to reinterpret what you've read. So lots of opportunity for drashes. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. And
You're
I'll make every effort. I'll make an effort, but I can't guarantee anything for next Shabbat.
I predict that we may not finish the complete discussion about that next week. May be able to pick up and rehash some of it for you. Okay? Good, and best wishes from all of us.
Thank you.
When's
Yeah.
when's the surgery, Brent?
The
Ken?
best wishes
Noon next
That's the
Friday.
healing and recovery, Ken.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. And I thank you all for that. And that's not why I mentioned, I just mentioned it like to give you a heads up that
When is
I'll
it
be
again?
maybe a little loopy if I'm able to show up.
But the
More
discussion
loopy than usual.
good, and we can easily come back to it the next week.
Let me jump in. Michael, which
Yeah.
version of the prayer book do you have? Just the Shabbat or the double version?
I've got the blue cover,
Yeah.
a reformed sitter, Shabbat.
And it says Shabbat?
It
Okay,
says
look on page 253, 253.
and the brackets,
No, in the regular.
253.
That should be the Mishabera. At the top of the page.
I got it. Thank you.
Sure, okay.
253. Just make a note of this. Thank you.
Well, any other announcements or?
The last session of the Proverbs class will be next Tuesday, the 29th. And then we're gonna be on hiatus for a little bit. But then the decision was to go back and start some of the narrative books. So we're either gonna start like with Joshua Judges, I think,
Okay,
and start going through that.
Mm.
But we're doing
Very good.
Proverbs. We're doing Proverbs for the last time on this Tuesday.
okay.
Okay.
Mm.
Then Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Thank you all. Thank you, Marty, Rabbi Norm, everybody.
Thank
And
you.
Thank you.
Sorry
Thank
for
you
all-
so much for a very stimulating morning. Thank you.
Welcome.